Welcome to the Killer Innovation Show, the longest continuously produced podcast in history. Each week, Phil McKinney brings you the insights and strategies to amplify your creativity and innovation skills. Here's your host, Phil McKinney.
Hello, and welcome to this week's show. A couple of weeks ago, I was having a conversation with somebody on my team, and one of the suggestions they came up with was, hey, we need to go benchmark our innovation process. And man, I had a negative reaction. I mean, my stomach just clenched up. I clenched my teeth. I'm thinking in the back of my head, I was about ready to explode, but I had to control myself because this person was asking a typical valid question, but my experience with benchmarking is not great. I've done benchmarking just as part of my role in senior leadership. I mean, in my career past, I was CTO at HP. Prior to that, I was a chief information officer at a telecommunications company. Back earlier in my career, I was in a big six consulting firm. So I've had a lot of experience around it, and benchmarking is pretty common. A lot of people do it. But boy, I've seen benchmarking done wrong more times than done right. And in particular, there's a big push in the consulting industries around innovation benchmarking, with some perception that by learning and adopting how other people do it, that you'll become good at it, when in reality, what you do is you become average at it. Innovation doesn't become a differentiator, doesn't allow you to take a leadership role in your industry. Benchmarking and adopting best practices used by others makes you average. And so I thought about this, been noodling on this for a while, and decided to do today's show. So today's show is around how to escape the innovation benchmark trap. Now, you may have already done benchmarking. Your CEO may be asking you to benchmark. Your board may be asking you to benchmark. If you're a publicly traded entity, Wall Street may be asking for you to benchmark. And you're looking at it going, how in the heck do you benchmark innovation? We're going to talk about that today, but more importantly, we're going to talk about how to be very, very careful how you set up, how you think about it, how you strategize around it, and what do you do with the information from an innovation benchmark, and how to avoid getting caught in the trap of making bad decisions because of some benchmark that was done. So, before we jump into this week's show, got a favor to ask. Can you follow, like, and share? Follow us on social media, like this show so other people see it, and share it. If there's people within your organization who you think would benefit from understanding this issue about benchmarking, go over to the show notes over at killerinnovations.com. Grab the link at the bottom of the page for today's show, copy that, send them the link, takes you right directly to the audio file, and you can and they can listen to it on their mobile phones or on inside of a browser, whatever way you get it to them. But share this to those that need to hear it. Plus, this all helps us to find and expand the subscriber base for the show, and I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. And with that, let's hop into this week's episode. Benchmarking is the comparing of your organization to others in order to measure your performance and to possibly identify areas for improvement. It has been common practice since the early 1900s, when Frederick Taylor, an American mechanical engineer, is credited with coining the term benchmarking in his book, The Principles of Scientific Management. Now, when benchmark is done correctly, it can help you learn from your peers, and it helps you identify areas for improvement. The process enables continuous learning and improvement because you've identified peers, those that are doing things that are having impact and change, and you keep an eye on them. Now, the key here is we're talking about innovation success. So these learnings and improvements can nurture the innovation success of your organization. Now, benchmarking helps you understand how you compare to others in your industry. It makes it easier to identify best practices. For example, benchmarking enables you to identify the companies that use the best technology or the fastest production time or the lowest cost. Whatever the measurement of success you define in your benchmarking activities. A benchmarking study can also help an organization's managers decide when planning strategic initiatives. Like product development. Should we go into a new product development cycle? How fast do our competitors come out with new products? If they do a new product every 2 years and we're every 4 years, maybe we should improve our process to get to a faster cycle, just as one example. Another could be in marketing, could be in sales, could be in a wide range of areas. And it may also provide some insights into where to allocate your corporate resources. A common part of the data that gets collected in benchmarking is headcount. And there's all kinds of weird metrics that come out of this as, dollars per revenue and other types of things. Now, while this is all good, there are also some challenges, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. But benchmarking in general could prove useful in business units where benchmarking data reveals which competitors are performing better than others. How do you compare? If you compare competitor A to competitor B, what's the difference? Who's better? But before benchmarking, you must first do research so you know who to benchmark against. Who is the peer? Now remember, you want to benchmark peers that are similar to you. You don't want something that's just like so crazy where you're comparing a software company to a steel manufacturer. Those don't work. You want something that is similar. What do I mean by similar? It could be same industry, similar size, selling and servicing a consistent geographic area. Could be a functional area. Is it R&D or is it sales? Be similar in the benchmarking. And also find somebody that's got a similar kind of business model to you. Now, the key here is you want to benchmark against similarities, not the differences. It could be tempting to say, we want to be more like Silicon Valley. So let's benchmark ourselves against the leading companies in Silicon Valley, Apple, Google, HP, whoever. And you're, a restaurant in Milwaukee. That comparison is going to be meaningless. Now, while benchmarking has been around for quite some time, and it has some strong benefits, there is bad that can come from benchmarking. And believe me, I've lived through all of these bads. The key here is that they can have negative consequences if they are done wrong. For example, if you benchmark against peers who are poorly chosen, like a restaurant in Milwaukee wanting to feel and act like a big company in Silicon Valley, not going to work. This can lead to bad decision making and can destroy organizations. I've seen it happen. I have lived through this. Therefore, it is important to handpick your benchmark peers in order to get accurate insights. Now, let me give you an example of a bad benchmark. So in the late 90s and early 2000s, MCI WorldCom, major telecom company here in the United States, was reporting results far better than any of its peers. It was shockingly good results. AT&T and others attempted to benchmark themselves to find out how MCI could have such standout performance. The result was the industry changing its strategies and its investment models to chase the MCI WorldCom results. There must be something they're doing. They are causing some form of breakout result. We need to act more like them. What's their investment model? How do they make decisions? What are the products that they're introducing? We need to model ourselves after them so that we can have those kinds of results, because Wall Street was all over the industries. saying, look, MCI is doing this. Why can't you get those same results? You are a poorer performance, and it starts to reflect in the share price. Now, while their competitors tried in vain to play catch up, MCI WorldCom continued to report surprising results. That is, until authorities revealed that MCI WorldCom was practicing fraudulent accounting practices. Yes, MCI WorldCom committed fraud. It overshowed the revenue streams. It misallocated expenses to make their results look good. Those results were not real. Those were false results. So what happened with all of this benchmarking activities? People chased it. People made decisions on a benchmark against somebody who, in their mind, looked like somebody that was just having outstanding performance, and they couldn't figure out how they did that, and they changed how they operated. Now, MCI WorldCom eventually went bankrupt. AT&T survived. AT&T survived unscathed. They had size, scale, all of the capabilities. However, others of the industry got trapped in the benchmark. They made bad decisions, such as a company that I was at, a company called Telligent. I was one of the original 5 founders of Telligent, and we got wrapped up in it. We were a competitive local exchange carrier, or what was called a CLEC at the time. And we looked at MCI's results and we're like, how are they able to deliver those kinds of results? We made decisions. We drove ourselves to try to drive a performance level the same as MCI WorldCom, and we made bad decisions. Telligent ended up in bankruptcy. We were a public company on the NASDAQ. Now, I was long gone from the organization before the bankruptcy happened, but Telligent ended up in bankruptcy. So here's an example of picking a benchmark in an industry, similarities, not tight similarities, but everybody's in the telecom market serving similar customers, albeit MCI WorldCom was much, much larger than Telligent, but we were publicly traded. Wall Street was pounding on every telecom company in the industry to get to those same level results. You need to innovate to get to that. And everybody tried, and people made bad decisions because of a bad benchmark. And that bad benchmark was a result of fraud by the senior leadership at MCI WorldCom. Now, with benchmarking, the consultants and advisors who have been offering the standard benchmarking services, such as benchmarking your sales or benchmarking your customer care, or benchmarking your new products and your new product strategies. These same consultants are now aggressively pushing what they are referring to as innovation benchmarks. Now, whatever your role is, if you're an innovation leader, you're a chief innovation officer, you're a team leader, odds are one of the big 6 consulting firms is either approached you or has approached your CEO or has approached your board of directors to do an innovation benchmark on your organization. If not, count yourself lucky. If you have, you know the nightmare this can cause for your organization. Now, these engagements are all about comparing how an organization's innovations compare to each other, your innovation processes, your innovation approach, your innovation culture, all of these things. But why has this become such the hot consulting offer? Because leaders in most organizations are feeling very uncertain about innovation. Now, one reason leaders are uncertain about their ability to innovate is that they may not feel confident in their ability to come up with new ideas and their historical inability to implement new ideas successfully. An organization may be able to come up with an idea, but most organizations historically struggle with making those ideas real. So how big of a problem is this? What are the consultants zeroing in on? Well, there was a study by the Economist Intelligence Unit that found that only 38% of executives said their organization was, quote, very good at turning innovative ideas into commercial success. Only 38%. When these kinds of studies come out, consultants are all over it. They're going to create a consulting product, service, advice offering to what they view as fix the problem. The problem here is only 38% of executives feel very good about their ability to turn innovative ideas into commercial success. When leaders benchmark their innovation approach to others, they're trying to benchmark themselves out of uncertainty and into comfort. They're uncertain because they aren't doing very well, and they want to see how other people do it. And therefore, can I copy what they do and therefore be one of the 38 that starts putting out these kinds of successes? This is part of what I refer to as the benchmark trap. A single organization benchmarking engagement does not stand on its own. You don't benchmark against yourselves. If you benchmark your organization's ability to turn out new ideas into commercial success, you are also benchmarking the quality of your peers who have been benchmarked before. You have to have somebody to benchmark against. And this is the service the consultants sell. Your company A, oh, we've done a benchmark for company B or company C. We'll compare you and you can determine how well you stack up. And leaders are looking for ways to stack themselves up to make them feel comfortable, like, oh, we got this figured out. Oh, we're not as bad as so-and-so. Or we're right in there with the big guys in our industry, etc. Now, when you benchmark yourself against competitors or industry best practices, the results will be that you become exactly like them in terms of innovation performance. When you benchmark, you're either trying to compare yourself or you're adopting what is viewed as their best practice to you. This basically drives everybody in the industry to converge towards the mean in results. You're not going to be the leader. You're going to be a me too. It's one of the things I always hated when I was in one of the big 6 consulting firms. I used to run the telecom consulting practice at Computer Sciences Corporation back in the early 90s. And one of the things that we sold was benchmarking. We also did process reengineering consulting work, etc. But we pushed on this concept of benchmarking, and I traveled all around the world and did these benchmarks. And while you're selling it to the leaders, and the leaders therefore get comfortable because they've got a document they can put in front of their board of directors or their investors or their shareholders to say, see, we're just as good, or we lead in these areas for us, which makes us better or different or whatever. But what you quickly realize that over time, as more and more companies within an industry or within an area focus on benchmarking and adopting best practices, etc., is everybody starts to look the same. Because if company A has a best practice on innovation and everybody copies that best practice, assuming that you can copy someone's best practice and be just as effective, you all start to look the same. There's no differentiation. I think best practices is the most stupid concept ever invented. And over my years of talking companies into doing best practices, I've seen the impact. It makes everybody average. Everybody looks the same. There is no ability to have standout performance when you've adopted the same practices, the same approach, the same strategies as everybody else. Now, as I said, though, everybody ends up being average, no matter how high or how low your original benchmark. You may have been an absolute leader in sales or innovation, but maybe you adopted customer care best practices from some of the others. Eventually, over time, everybody looks the same. Now, innovation benchmarking can be a powerful tool. It can bring benefits when done correctly, but it can also lead them astray if it's not handled correctly. Now, some of the consequences of innovation benchmarking include: number one, leaders run unnecessary risks trying to replicate the benchmark results exactly. We find areas where somebody else is better than us, so we're going to adopt it. They try to replicate. Now, why is this a problem? Because benchmarking typically involves leaders looking for insights and inspiration from benchmarking peers. And the benchmarking experience is often an oversimplified down to exactly what people did, how they did it, and when they did it, and who was involved. They don't. It's a black box. It's oversimplified. It's not enough detail to where you can actually duplicate. But we tend to focus on, well, they did this, and they had these 3 steps, and they had these 2 levels of decision making, and this, blah, 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 this is how they did it. This is, one, you don't have all of the details because there's things inherently behind the scenes. And 2, you're thinking it's a formula. If you follow step A, step B, step C, magic happens, you will get the same results. The result is this can lead companies to take unwarranted financial, strategic, or organizational risks when you're trying to replicate the benchmark experience of a peer that is often very unique to the peer. There's a lot of things behind the scenes. There's a lot of history in an organization that you don't understand, that are not captured in the benchmarking activity. So be careful when the leaders run unnecessary risks trying to replicate, trying to capture the magic formula of a benchmark. Number 2, leaders may benchmark themselves out of uncertainty and into comfort without realizing it. Now, when I say that, you're probably going, yeah, that's exactly what we want to do. Leaders want to benchmark themselves out of uncertainty. We want to get comfortable. Leaders are looking for insights and inspiration from benchmarking those peers. Taking benchmarking too far can lead to what I call the comfort trap. Comfort can be a problem. Now, comfort by itself isn't bad in itself, but by benchmarking themselves into comfort without realizing it, leaders can miss new opportunities and threats that emerge in the market. We get comfortable because, we're just as good as competitor A. We're not any worse than competitor B. Now, this causes you to get very comfortable and find a way to get to stay your steady course, no need to change, everything is fine. Now, what you're really looking for, again, is you want those insights. What worked for your benchmarking peers? Now, keep in mind what works for them, may not work best for your organization. You may have a unique value proposition. You may have a different competitive environment. You may have different sunk cost. You may have different brand equity, right? Be careful of trying to fall into this comfort by just simply finding and cherry picking those things that either make you look the same or slightly better, but no worse than your competitors. And if you get to that zone, you go, okay, I don't need to look any further. I don't need to really understand. I don't need to change. We're good. Steady course. Many leaders will try to use the benchmark as a rationalization for what they're doing now is good enough. Be careful. And number 3, leaders benchmark their competitors rather than taking a fresh look at their innovation approach. This is probably the one that frustrates me the most, right? I get calls all the time from people saying, can you tell me the magic steps? What are the exact steps I need to follow? What are they? Blah, blah. And people who've read my book or who've taken the Innovation Bootcamp course or who've, has to get on the phone with me for an hour to understand, why it's not working for them. Be careful. Take what somebody else is doing in their innovation approach is not something you can replicate. Now, when leaders benchmark their competitors, rather than taking a fresh look at your own innovation approach, they fall into the trap of comparing themselves to others who are not their innovation peers. This goes back to, I want to innovate like Google, or I want to innovate like Apple, but I'm a steel manufacturer in Alabama, or I'm a hotel in Little Rock, right? But I want to innovate like Apple. I want to innovate like. Be careful. You want to understand and find people who are innovating that are similar to you, and not to duplicate or replicate, but adapt to what would work for your organization and your culture. If you do this wrong, where you're just looking to copy somebody else's innovation process, this is going to, again, lead to bad decision making that can destroy your organization. The problem is that when you benchmark your competition, which includes innovators from other industries or geographies, size, scale, whatever, you automatically compare yourself to others who have been successful in completely different strategies for innovation success than yours. And then when you try to imitate them instead of trying your new approach, you will fail. You will fail. Be very careful about this. Be very careful. I'm going to give you a personal example, and hopefully this will drive this message home. And this is an example of my time at HP. So when I was CTO at HP, Mark Hurd, who was the CEO, had a quote that was ingrained in everything the executive team did. And that quote is, if you stare at the numbers long enough, they will eventually confess. Now, Mark put in place a culture he referred to as extreme benchmarking. Not just benchmarking, extreme benchmarking. This required that every leader at HP was to know the key benchmark metrics for each competitor and to have a plan to meet or beat the competitor's benchmark results. Revenue per device, profit margin per device, revenue per employee, whatever the metric was. You had to know it. And you had a lot of pressure. There was the pressure from the benchmark numbers being compared to your competitors. If your numbers were not better than theirs, then you weren't running your part of the business appropriately. You literally had to be prepared to answer a question from Mark walking down the hall, asking, so, what was the last quarter's benchmark results for XYZ competitor? And what were our numbers for the same quarter? And what's your plan to fix A, B, C, D, E, whatever the issue is, where your number was not as good as the benchmark results? I mean, it was insane. The result, though, of all of this was more than a few poor business decisions on the part of HP. Now, one example that I was directly involved in was the cutting of HP's investment in innovation and R&D to match the spending of our Asia-Pacific-based competitors. Now, to give you some context, HP was spending roughly 3% of product revenue in the PC group on R&D. Now, this was R&D, not innovation. This is R&D. So this would be the next version of a product. The extension of an existing product, or maybe introducing a new product that would fit into a product line family. This is what I refer to as R&D. So in this case, HP spending about 3% of product revenue in the PC group in R&D. That included both consumer and commercial business products. To compare that, Apple was spending about 9% of product revenue into the R&D group. The peer that Mark was forcing us to compare against And our Asia Pacific based competitors, and I'm not going to name the company, was spending 0.8% of product revenue on R&D. So 3% for HP, 9% for Apple, 0.8% for this Asia Pacific based competitor. There was constant pressure to cut resources or move things like engineering offshore to get the benchmark closer to our peer. And let me tell you, the pressure was intense. This is the perfect example of picking the wrong peer. In the case of all my conversations with Mark Hurd, it was all about this Asia Pacific competitor. And my question was, well, in reality, you should give me 3 times the R&D budget so that I can compete against Apple. Right? That was my logical argument. And Mark was, how do you get 3% of your revenue on R&D spend down to less than 1%? How do you cut R&D spend? Now, I pushed back hard on this approach, and specifically, when we got into the cutting of R&D spend, and look, the benchmarks affected sales and marketing and distribution and supply chain and reverse supply chain and all kinds of variety of metrics. But when it came to R&D, I pushed back. I pushed back hard. Now, my one regret was not pushing back even harder, or finding a way to convince Mark and others of the folly of this approach. Now, you would think my role, my personal passion around innovation, I would have been able to figure this out. Nope, I failed. And it is one of my few regrets from my time as CTO at HP. Now, the one key lesson that I walked away from this is one, whenever someone says the word benchmark, man, my antenna go up, because I've seen it done wrong. Thus why today's show. What's important here is that when you talk about any kind of numbers like this, when you're doing any kind of a comparison of how you were doing it compared to some other organization or team, or you're reading a book or you're reading a magazine and go, oh, we should be doing that. Understand the context of the information. Is that somebody that's really a peer? Is it really a good comparison? And the odds of you being able to pick something up and drop it in and have it work is like near zero. I spent 8, 9, almost 10 years in one of the big 6 consulting houses, convincing others to do benchmarks. So I've been on the other side of the table, and I'll be the first to admit that was bad advice given. It was the most popular advice. It was the advice everybody was giving at the time. But whenever someone says benchmark, I am really concerned. Why? You cannot just duplicate what somebody else is doing. You have to put it in context. How similar are they to us? Are they in the same industry, same geography, same scale, same business models? How are they the same and how are they different? And go in with the understanding that context, because otherwise you're going to make important decisions around your innovation strategies, and you need to understand how you are making those decisions, what things are you willing to try, and why are you willing to try them in the context of your information, your comparison to the peer. Now, as I wrap this up, the best way to avoid falling into the innovation benchmark trap is not to benchmark for benchmark's sake. A lot of organizations just benchmark because, everybody benchmarks, or my board of directors asks me to do an annual benchmark. Don't get caught in that trap. It's not about the benchmark metrics. Instead, learn from your peers, but don't assume that what worked for them will work for you. You can learn, but you need to adapt. You need to have some discernment as to what would work and what to ignore. If you follow blindly, your organization, one, will become average, or worse, you will destroy your organization. Like what happened with Telligent trying to benchmark against MCI WorldCom that was committing fraud. So if you are follow blindly, if you don't step back and really think about it and put it in context, first off, you will become average if you follow blindly. That's in the best case. And in the worst case, you could put your organization into bankruptcy. Instead, look at what your peers are doing and ask yourself two questions. Why are they doing it that way? Why are they innovating that way? Why? And what can we learn from it? What can we learn from that approach? Is there some elements of that that we can try and experiment? It is critical to get inside the mind of your innovation peer that you've identified and understand their thought process and discern what of their approach is worth your experimenting with. Don't adopt it wholesale. Find the elements that work and experiment with it. If you follow this practice blindly, meaning you just do benchmarks just for benchmark's sakes, your organization may drive itself right off the innovation cliff. What has been your experience with benchmarks? If you've been in the innovation game for quite a while, you lead innovation within an organization, I'm going to assume that you've had some form of benchmark. It may not be a formal benchmark. Maybe your leadership has asked for you for some metrics, some statistics, and then you're off, Googling numbers to see, are we good, bad, different, the same as our competitors? Our percentage of R&D spend as a percentage of revenue, the number of ideas in our funnel, the success rate or the kill rate of our innovation ideas. Whatever those metrics are, that qualifies as what I would say kind of a loose definition of benchmarking, or you may have been impacted or you may have hired an outside consultant to come in and do an innovation benchmark. What has been your experience? I would love to hear it. Hop on over to killinnovations.com. You can drop comments down in the show notes, or you can just send them to me directly, phil@killerinnovations.com. Would love to hear your thoughts. I've had a lot of experience in benchmarking over my entire career, and I have my own strong opinions, but would love to hear what what your thoughts are and what your experience has been. With that, thank you for the time out of your busy schedule to join us on today's show. Greatly appreciate that. The one thing I ask is help us spread the word. Let other people know about the show. Post it to your social media. You can post using the share bar at the bottom of the show notes over at killinnovations.com for today's show, and hit whether you want to share it to Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever. Go ahead and just click the button and add your comments and share that. That would be great. Telling other people about the show, whatever means you feel comfortable with, and helping us get the word out as we grow our subscriber base. This show was created back in 2005 as my way to pay it forward. My mentor, Bob Davis, who brought me into really my first, what I would call first real job in the tech industry, put a lot of time into my career. I've talked about in the past. My book is dedicated to Bob. The success I have is directly attributed to the investment that Bob Davis made in my career. He's now retired and he's a bus driver in Phoenix, Arizona. But when I talked with Bob and asked him way back in the early 2000s, how can I pay you back for the success that I've had and the investment, time, and energy that you put into my career? And he laughed. He says, you can't pay me back. You have to pay it forward. And so this show, all the content we publish up on the website, whether it be at killinnovations.com or over at philmckinney.com or LinkedIn or or any of the other social media platforms. We do that in order to kind of share both the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you have an opportunity to hear what I've done and learn from that and apply that, and also know that when you step in it and something goes wrong, you're not the first one. I've probably done it, and I probably did it a lot worse than you'll ever do it. So hopefully you find all this information is useful in your path to innovation and to your career success. So drop me a note. Love to hear from you. If there's questions, show topics, things that you would like to hear me talk about, just drop me a note. Phil@killerinnovations.com. And with that, have a great week. Work on that idea, launch that innovation, and change the world. Bye-bye.
Podcasting nonstop since 2005, this has been the Killer Innovation Show on the Innovators Network.